More content, more signals, more output. AI does all of that by Tuesday. Our competitors do that all by Thursday. The smartest companies, they're hiring storytellers right now, the oldest skill in human history.
Welcome to Connect to Market. I'm Casey Cheshire. Join us as we learn from marketing leaders who are driving founder-led growth. We're sponsored by Ringmaster, building B2B podcasts and communities to reconnect you with your audience. Okay, we're doing this thing. Oh man, I am so excited. This has been one of those episodes long in coming. We have been coordinating, prepping, getting this thing ready. My guest is a busy guy. He is all over the place, working with some of the biggest and best growing companies all over the planet. And I'm excited to sort of sit him down for just a second, just a flash in the pan to learn from him today while he's in the middle of helping those businesses led by engineers in this very interesting 0 to 300 million. Like, it's a very special spot, and he'll tell us more about that whole area. But who is he? Who is he? Before I lose myself, he is a marketing leader, a thought leader, honestly, a thought leader to thought leaders, a revenue accelerator, fractional GTM, an operator, an engineer's best friend, you name it. He's a growth advisor. He brings in GTM systems. He likes to unify revenue. He likes to scale. He's not afraid of AI. He's worked with giant, crazy, awesome companies like Visa, Microsoft, PayPal, you name it. Do you know GTM Partners? Yeah, he was their first certified partner, even contributed to the book. Founder and CEO at Entry Point One, Tim Hillison. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Casey, it's great to be here. How are you?
Good. How did we even get you on the show, man? You're a busy guy. I'm excited.
It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to learning from you.
Likewise. And the tradition goes to learn from you here. In order for me to focus, I need to put on this giant blue foam finger to ask you the first question. So now, Tim, what is the number one thing that marketers need to do in order to connect to their market?
Well, Casey, a few weeks ago, I was at a private dinner in San Francisco where there were about 20 leaders, founders, operators, technologists. And you know what we were all talking about? Yes, we were talking about AI.
Yeah, right.
Someone stopped the whole room and they said, "These tools are amazing, but they are no substitute for people. We need people as much or more than we ever have." And, the theme of the night was really AI makes us more human. But here's the tension. Every marketing team I talk to, the pressure runs the other way.
Yeah.
More content, more signals, more output. AI does all of that by Tuesday. Our competitors do that all by Thursday. The smartest companies, they're hiring storytellers right now, the oldest skill in human history. And, 2 days ago on Martech, there was a stat that stuck with me, Casey. The real risk of AI is marketing commoditization. From Stanford, 2026, right? 88% of organizations adopt AI, same tools everywhere. So funny when you're talking to people and they're using Claude for this and Claude Code for that. We all are, right? And same tools, same commoditization.
Yeah, it's not giving us a different answer than it gave someone else 5 minutes ago, right?
That's exactly it. And you know what? Everyone says the old playbooks are broken. And I sort of laugh every time I hear that, Casey. Because you shouldn't have been using a playbook in the first place. A playbook assumes that the conditions that produced it still exist, and they don't. And so, a playbook is a borrowed strategy from different conditions. We're going to be talking a little bit about connecting to the market and how exponential technologies changes the conditions or change the conditions even faster than a playbook can adapt.
Yeah, it reminds me of a friend of mine who tried using a SEO strategy from the late 1990s and found themselves blocked on Google for they had tried a 30,000 keywords in white text on a white background at the bottom of their site, which may have worked in an old playbook, I don't know, 3 decades ago, but not anymore. And they found themselves not even listed anymore. Google had straight up banned them for their atrocity.
That's crazy. And, to that point, I started asking myself a different question. And so then I started talking to dozens of CEOs and CROs and CMOs and CFOs, basically every seat at the revenue table. And one question I asked them is, what would your customers lose if they couldn't do business with you?
And what would they lose? That's feels like one of those tough questions that we may not want to ask because we're not sure. We worry the answer may be nothing.
Yeah, and I think that when we look at it that way, it's not meant to put us on the defensive, but it's not meant to sugarcoat things either. And, it really comes down to one of four things, which I call the four S's, right?
4 S's, let's go.
State, scale, system, and signal. And that's what it actually means to connect to your market. It's not a campaign, nor is it a playbook. It's one of those four things built and deepened over time. But before I walk you through them, I'd love to hear what you're hearing from your community about staying relevant right now.
Gosh, I think people, and myself included, there's just so many neat things you can do. I have certainly allowed myself to get distracted by the futuristic things and forget to answer the core questions. What am I even providing? What is the core problem I'm solving? Am I solving a problem? Or is it just more fun to build out a neat little mini internal app on Claude Code that maybe, or, some crazy campaign and use this cool technology, just mess around with Whisper Flow for a little bit, Yeah, I feel like I've certainly gotten distracted, and a lot of the conversations I've been hearing aren't even on that topic. They're just on all the fun you can have.
It's amazing, right? We're all building, but just because we're all building doesn't make us all, it doesn't make everything a product, right? And so it's very interesting, because I see this in the market where even larger companies are building, but then they're having security breaches, or they're doing things in a way where we've certainly, quote unquote, democratized coding, right? So now all of us, even marketers, right, are coding. But back to the four S's. I mean, uh, when I think of them, I think, like, how can we, we've all talked about moats. A lot of times it's in features. I work with a lot of engineering-led companies, and they all default to features. But the first one is called state, which is arrive first, right? Which is, we've named the problem before anyone else did. And our competitors argue against our own language, then they sell using our own vocabulary. And I want to give a shout out to Chris Lockheed at Category Pirates, because, this is a lot about category creation. But, Samsara is a great company that does this. Have you heard of Samsara?
I've heard of them. What do they do?
So they do connected operations, right? This means that every RFP in fleet and logistics is now written exactly that way, from how they've coined and termed the vocabulary for their category. And a competitor would need to say, no, you don't need connected operations. You just need our sensors, right? And undoing that is crazy, because they do something called Internet of Things, IoT, truck and equipment, workers.
Like fleet management, all that.
Exactly. $2 billion in ARR, 25 terabytes of data points running through their network yearly. I mean, and another, perhaps like Samsara is out there, but maybe one that you know a lot, or one that the listeners know a lot, is Gong. And Udi Leger did an amazing job.
Udi's great. Shout out to Udi.
Revenue intelligence, right?
Yeah.
300 million ARR. But the key thing is 3.5 billion calls analyzed. So yeah, there's competitors out there. They talk in Gong's language.
Yeah. The feature as a moat, to your point, is not a thing. I mean, with us all building, we can all add that feature. I love the emphasis on, even if it's the same feature, but you don't call it, what did Samsara call it?
Connected operations.
Do you have connected operations, TM?
Yeah.
Well, no, technically we don't, because it's a trademark of Samsara, but we have this other thing instead. Well, so you don't have it then? Is that what you're saying? You don't? Man, that's tough.
Yeah, fleet and logistics is what that is. But I mean, I would be interested in understanding, like if we went into category ownership before it's obvious, right? I mean, like, it's really interesting because, we talk about content and we talk about all of these different things, but, really developing the foundational models for how we compete, that's what's changing, right?
Yeah. So how do you address state? What is the starting point, or what is the core thing to think about with state?
The state, which, I mean, defined as you name the problem before anyone else does, right? Customers think of you before they go looking. Like, people are, when you talk about these fleet and trucking companies, they're talking about like, how are our operations connected? How is the truck talking with the warehouse? Like, what are we doing? Right.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because when there's an RFP out, a lot of times the people that are launching these RFPs are actually speaking in a way that Samsara coined, right? And so all of a sudden you're getting these, and the same thing with Gong, right? When people are writing, they've heard of it, and so they're talking the same language before they can sell their own product.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And that's a hell of a moat compared to a feature that can be duplicated tomorrow.
Or just like a thought leadership piece, right? I mean, it took a lot of time, and but think about how we want customers to talk about that, right? And words matter.
Yeah, they do. They do. Man, fantastic. So state, and this is the framework, right? This is the framework for what? Solving this.
Defensible competitive advantage in the age of exponential technology, right? I mean, every day there's a new model. Every time there's this, I mean, how many companies, Casey, did you know that halted their launch or decided to do something when Claude Code came out?
Yeah.
When Claude Code came out, I mean, I knew probably about 6 companies that stopped their launch because it was going to change their product, right? And the way that they would monetize it. And this is happening all the time. So, the goal of this framework is to figure out how we actually build defensible competitive advantage in an age of accelerated chaos, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it does. Man, I mean, I feel like that isn't even the title we should name it, like defensive competitive advantage in the in the age of AI. Like, yeah. Sick. What scale? How do we chew that up?
So we talked about state. The second S is called scale. And, it's not about your size. Okay. And so, many people think of it that way. And you can think like, customer count isn't scale, but let's talk about compounding data. Okay. And PwC gave a stat in April that was about 70%, 74% of AI value is captured by about 20% of organization. So individual productivity is up, but companies still cannot move together, right? And this is what I noticed in my work in GTM is, the systems are not allowing, individual, the individual OS, so to speak, the tools you use and what you can build and, the amazing productivity that you can get to by noon, right? That's not the same as working in a team, right? Specifically in a go-to-market team and how you move together to build. And so, again, scale is critical mass. It's not customer count. But it's really about what makes your data better and for every subsequent customer, right? And what I mean by that is, if your data does nothing between interactions, you just have records. You don't have scale.
Man, I feel like the clips are just sort of popping. Yeah, they're just individual records. They're not connected. And just like that, individuals working on their own little builds are not building together.
One thing I tried to do, Casey, is sort of take different levels of companies, not just Google does this, because, for startups to hear that Google does something, well, of course they do that, right? Of course they do. But I don't know if you've heard of a company called Vertiv, which is a super interesting company, and they're in data center power management, right? Very relevant today for AI. And they have every single deployment that they do generates something called operational telemetry automatically. Okay. And what is that? WTF is that, right? And that is like, look, they know that when they install their systems that they have a problem with a part on day 42. Well, when they install that system because of that operational telemetry, they get alert. And on day 40, they go in and they replace that part. And so all of a sudden you have no downtime, right? Now multiply this by all of the data centers, right? And all of a sudden the experience that they have is different, but they get this telemetry, this data feedback from all of their things, and they can use it for predictive maintenance, right? So that all of a sudden the company that's having that problem and making that business go down, that's not happening with Vertiv's customers.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Connecting the dots here, left and right. This is fantastic. Okay. So I feel like we have two S's.
Yeah. I would say another thing is on just for everyone is like, I don't know if you speak a different language. A lot of times our kids are learning different languages, and I don't know if you've ever used Duolingo.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Duolingo, say you're speaking Spanish, right?
Yep.
And you're trying to conjugate a verb. And, when you go through that and your data is going back and making that data better for someone in Australia who's learning Spanish too. So actually you are making the system better, again, machine learning, right? And deep learning and how it's applied. But every interaction you have is making it better for someone else. And that's all over the world. And that's scale.
Dude, this is great. This is great. Yeah. Yeah.
So the next one is called system. And this is about customer choice, Casey. So because, when customers stay, because leaving means reorganizing how they work, right? And so I think that, when Melissa was on your show, she said something that I thought that was really amazing, which was starting from the inside out from her concentric circles model, relied on versus remembered, right? I mean, I think that this applies very well to this. And, in the deepest cases, who they are, brand lives here. Integration lives here. Regulatory certification lives here. So, it's interesting. Last week I was at this conference called Miro Canvas 26. Shout out to Miro. And, one of the things that they said that I thought that was amazing was when every function optimizes locally, revenue loses velocity, and systems fix that. Right. And so, this is again, to Melissa's point about the concentric circles, but this is about a system that we all feed. And for marketers, again, coming from a brand background as well, brand lives here.
what's your take on even brand itself? Because a lot of people get confused, and it's either everything, it's the all thing, or it's a waste of spend, or the spend that you can't justify with ROI.
So I started my career in brand at Visa, and I still use the lessons today. I mean, still one of the most recognized brands in the world. And it's different working for one of those brands and, or a P&G or whatever than working for a small brand. It's been a bad word for a long time, but, it's really about building a system. And let me give you a few examples so that we can see that I'm just not talking about visual identity, right? Which is clearly one of the most tangible areas of brand, certainly that we work in. But have you ever heard of a company called Rippling?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so Rippling is not HR software. Okay. What they are is wired payroll, IT, and finance. And they have built something called the workforce graph. So, when you start, not only do you get your paycheck, but they're going to provision to IT to give you a laptop. And then, they're going to, all your financial stuff is there too. So if you were to remove it from one of their customers have to rebuild 3 systems.
Mm.
Okay? So not just one. So there's a lot of pain there. And if you think about that in their brand, they're talking about a system, right? Um, Rippling has a $16.8 billion valuation, 25,000 plus customers. you know, if you switch, you have to rebuild your HR, your IT, your finance while running. I mean, and so it's interesting because one of my friends, um, at Amplitude, Tanya Littlefield, had this post, props to her, last week, and it was about, that phrase of we're building the plane while we're flying it. And she had this image of how it was like changing shape to a helicopter, then to this and that, because it's just so all over the place, right? And the thing is like, if we go down to how we're going to do business, what we need is a lot less chaos. And so Rippling is helping us ground in those core functions without having to rebuild them each time. And that's pretty powerful, right?
Man, that is sticky.
Yeah.
I can see why they've offered me, hey, Casey, hop on this demo with us, and we'll send you some goodies. And I was like, but I think it makes sense that they're going hard in that direction, because some of the challenges, like changing payroll providers or changing your, like benefits providers and things in PEOs, it feels just so challenging anyways. So you got to make it worth the while. And it sounds like they're offering enough improvement across the board. But yeah, if you think it's hard to get off a PEO, man, trying to get off Rippling, forget about it. Probably better to go to another company.
Think about this too, though, because we all do payments, right? And I mean, and I was telling you, I started my career at PayPal or at Visa. I've worked at PayPal. I've worked a lot in the payments ecosystem and fintech. But, one company that I love is Stripe, right? Stripe has built all of their payments ecosystem into product code. So if you want to change your payments provider, you need to change all your code. I mean, that is really complicated to disentangle.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, would you summarize system into the entanglement space, or is it beyond that because you've got the brand, you've got the everything once?
I would say that customers stay because leaving means reorganizing how they work, think, and in the deepest cases, who they are, right? Brand is here, physical integration is there, regulatory certification lives there. So, the answer to your question is brand everything? No, but it's a very important system, right? Because buying still is very emotional. And, the more that they can know us and understand us, it's important. But, if you're in healthcare or health tech or med tech and you need to have some type of certification, right? Like an FDA certification to work, that also creates trust. And I would say that FDA certification and brand are two different things, but they are related and a lot of times brothers and sisters, right? That makes sense?
Totally makes sense. Yeah. But thinking in terms of blocks of systems and yeah, I love it.
Hey, marketing leaders, it's Amanda here from Ringmaster B2B Podcasting. In today's market, B2B buying is built on one thing: trust. And there's no better way to build that trust than through a podcast that builds connection. At Ringmaster, we help you launch and grow shows that will amplify your brand and can help drive real demand. The best part? We handle all the heavy lifting so you can focus on the big picture. So if you've been thinking about starting a podcast for your brand or taking your existing one to the next level, visit ringmaster.com to chat and book a call.
Dude, do we even need a fourth S at this point?
There is, and it's called Signal. And, we're all, as marketers, we're all obsessed with Signal because we're thinking, oh my God, my clay table. And, do I have signals and stuff like that? And I would say that, the definition for that is something called data intelligence. And that's know why our customers buy, stay, and expand, not just that they do. So it's not enough to say, hey, looking at this dashboard, this person engaged. We have to understand why. And, one of the differences with the new technologies and the way that they're working and how they're changing is everything is correlation based into the predictive analytics and that signal. And really, we're going much more towards a causality based or a causation based, meaning, there's signals, but, we treat them as proof, but what really caused them, right? And so again, many teams don't have this yet. And it's interesting because we talk about like what it sort of opens up. Here's an example. So have you ever heard of the company Harvey?
Construction company?
No, it's AI for legal work.
Got it.
They have fine-tuned on privileged work. So from top 50 law firms, attorney-client privilege, okay? So those firms cannot give that data to a competitor. It's privileged, right? So that is their moat, right? Is that if you think about it, right? And that is what Signal is, right? Their companies just can't repeat it. The other thing is, Datadog. I don't know if you know Datadog, but 2.7 billion ARR, 29,000 plus customers. But they understand which upstream conditions caused failure, not just the systems that went down. And so, again, this is about deeply understanding our customers, not just saying this is what we do and this is how we read it.
Yeah, you got it. The why. Like, it's harder to answer that sometimes, but it's also something it's a lot easier to take action on it if you know the why.
That's exactly it. And I would say this too is, Casey, is they really build on each other. So it is a system, right? So state enables scale, right? And scale builds system, and system generates signal, and signal sharpens state, right? And so as AI replicates features in an afternoon, it can't replicate a company that has built one of these things and is growing it, right? And so when we look at what we should be building as marketers or in systems and how we connect to those, do we just build the tactical or do we build the hard and the strategic foundation?
So I get this. Not only are there four, but they're in order. And I see how they build upon each other. And also, I can see how, tell me if I'm wrong. If you started with Signal, do you not have the ability to respond properly because you don't have the state and the scale?
Well, you could. I think that different companies have different entry points. And so I think that that's certainly a possibility based on where you are and based on where your, moat could lay, right? But I think that, again, back to what we were talking about at the beginning when I was telling you about this dinner in San Francisco, is we're all using the same tools. AI amplifies everything, right? I mean, and so, if you have a system, or if you don't have one, it's going to amplify the chaos. So really it's about how you're operating and where you're going. In the case of Samsara, they created the language around how to talk about the problem. And it almost seems like they can diagnose the problem of the companies in their area better than the companies can, right? Whereas when we're talking about um, scale, remember, Duolingo, you're improving the system for everyone else. So it gets better and better. It's not like a different system where it's just you talking and it's the same experience every time. All of a sudden you go back in and it's learned your patterns and it's helping Casey talk Spanish better and better and better each time. That's stickiness, right? And then, system, when we're talking about, Harvey, for example, and this, or excuse me, really the example here was Vertiv, right? Where it was about the data as well, the data intelligence. And so, it's very dynamic, Casey. And what we need to do is understand who we are and why we are, just as you said.
Yeah, man. But would you start at state?
I think it depends on the business, right? I mean, I think it depends on the business, but I would want to ask, when I'm talking to these um, CEOs, CFOs, CROs, CMOs, et cetera, in different operators, I'm really curious about, what would our best customer actually lose, right? Because if you can just, change software and continue to operate, well, do you really have any of the four S's, or do you just have a product, right? And if all of a sudden it's going to take months to just disentangle, and rebuild your systems, well, then I think that you actually have a competitive moat, right? And how are you going to reinforce it with the actions that you're taking?
Man, dude, where does this go? The acceleration of AI. These sound like first principles, the point where it even still with all the distractions, these are the core. But where do you see this going, even in a year's time? Where's AI taking marketing?
I think that it's taking us, first of all, being open to it, right? I think that everyone needs to, jump on and learn. There's a lot of fear about, it taking jobs, but I think that work is going to be fundamentally different. I also believe that there will be a transition period that's going to be difficult, right? For all of us. And it has to do with, CEOs saying AI can do that, laying off. And we've seen, Block, or we've seen other companies, but I think that we need, as marketers and as people, as humans, right, take a little bit of agency in this and say, well, Block laid off all these people so because they said AI first. And I'll give you another example, which is one of my favorite, and I wrote a post about that too. Do I really want to do business with them? Can I recognize what a Block machine is? Can I go in and say, no, I'm going to pay cash, or I'm going to go to a different vendor? And, if you're not going to hire humans, and I got to tell you something, I'm human first, then do I want to do business with you? Because I think that it's about collective action too. But did you ever see an ad campaign for a company by the name of Artisan that does AI SDRs?
No, but I've definitely, that feels like a topic that's everywhere. AI SDRs, like phone or just email based?
No, they did billboards and out of home, and their slogan was stop hiring humans. Okay. And it was for their AI SDR. And I have a question for you, and that is, would you want to work at a company like that? I mean, because who do you think they're going to lay off first?
Definitely the humans.
Right. And I mean, and so, again, that's probably tongue in cheek, and they had a lot of examples. But if people are willing to do that, how more willing are they to push it even farther? Right. And so, I think that responsible and ethical AI starts and ends with us. And this is about us taking those decisions now, whether it's collective action against a brand, or whether it is collective action for a brand, or it is about asserting ourselves as consumers as well of these and developing these systems that make sense for us in our future, right? Because I don't think that anyone wants mass layoffs, right? Do they? And so, there's a saying, I don't know if you've heard it, but it's like, when your neighbor gets laid off, it's a recession. When we get laid off, it's a depression, right? And I think that we really need to watch out for each other, not just ourselves.
Man, 100%. Uh, yeah, looking out for each other, looking out for the fellow humans as this thing goes is important. And I'm just hopeful that, the more that AI helps it make everything more efficient, more everything, then the more we can put the spotlight back on the human to human type contact,
Well, there'll be all of that, but that's how you connect to market, right? So if you talk about, human to human, human to agent, agent to human, agent to agent, right? I mean, you know, is agent to agent connecting with market? I mean, sure, in a certain sense, but for me, and at Entry Point one of our taglines is AI crunches numbers, we build relationships, because we highly prize human relationships and the work that we do, right? And so, you can tell, again, companies that do and don't, and that is going to be a defining characteristic of people who choose or don't choose to continue to do business with them.
Yeah. Yeah, the human side. Man, this is awesome. Well, my next question, and it's kind of a human question too, is who are you? Who are you? How do you know these things? Can you take me back in time? Little Tim days, did you know you're going to be a marketing leader, a thought leader, book contributor, all these things, like consultant to the stars even? And what was it like? What was little Tim like?
Little Tim was a curious little guy, right? Who played a lot of sports and had parents that were like, go out and experience things and travel and become you. And, I think that I had opportunities my wife is Spanish. I've lived in a different country for, 16 years. I speak different languages, and I'm just sort of a curious guy. Now, we live in San Francisco, two boys. We've had, I'm just interested. I've worked in tech all my life. I've had the same ups and downs as other people, but, um, I have been I've been using AI since the beginning, right? And right now my business has 38 agents, and I've got my open claw and all of this stuff, and it's really fabulous. But at the end of the day, what does that mean for us? And what does that mean for our children? And what does that mean for humanity? Right. And you hear all of these naysayer things, and I really do believe that the future is going to be amazing, but there is going to be a transitionary period. And we'll just have to see what that is as layoffs ramp up. But I think that if we don't figure out ways to thrive, then the market will take its toll. And the reason that I built this framework, and I've had the hypothesis, validated through a bunch of interviews and surveys and stuff like that, is because I think that we can, but we need to look at things in a different light, because it really does change how we work. And as we are grappling with our daily, kids and dinner and out the door and work and demands and all of this other stuff, we need to be able to think a bit differently, right? Of like, not what the technologies are doing now, but what they're going to do later, right? In how we're going to work. And so that's sort of where I am. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but follow up on that. I know you got a degree in psych, but also in Spanish literature. Is that right?
I did. So, I got to say, I didn't know what I wanted to study, went to UCSB, and I sort of fell into it. I studied abroad, and I realized quickly right away that I needed more of a grounding in business. Because I spoke Spanish, I went and I did an MBA at a school called ESA in Barcelona, Spain. And talk about changing my life. I met someone. We've been married ever since. My kids are dual citizens. We go to Spain every year. I just sold my house in Barcelona. I made, and so I believe in, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey too, right? And another thing I would say is about these relationships is, I've worked with and met people where it's been for like 20 years where we've been doing things together, right? And so, I just think that there's a lot to be said for that, and AI doesn't replicate that. And we need to recognize that we have a lot more agency than a lot of what we hear or read by selective media.
Man, powerful. I feel like we could have a whole conversation about just that global reach and how visiting other places can also just widen your own mind to think differently, to your point about even what's going on right now. But I have one final question but it's a bit of a hypothetical question, Tim. So I don't know if you're ready for this.
I love it.
All right. You see, I may or may not have a time machine over here in New Hampshire. So you come back, visit family, swing on by, we'll get some lobster, some beer. It's in the backyard covered in a tarp. So we use this time machine. You get a chance to go back and meet yourself 4 days after graduating with that dual degree. And you get a chance to go say hi. What would you tell yourself? What would you tell that Tim?
One of the things that I think that is most powerful and, learned from a lot of people on the way, I would say, in my career, is be intentional. I don't know if you've seen it. It's one of the most played videos on YouTube, but Mr. Beast, if you know who that is, he made a video before he was even famous. And he said, "My future self is." And again, unscripted, just thoughts, time capsules, right? And, look at where he is today. And I would go back and I would tell myself, put a stake in the ground, think about where you want to go, think about who you want to be, and think about the types of people you want to be with. And, and be really intentional about that and work towards that every day.
Man, that's powerful. Yeah, follow-up question for that. Do you think you would listen to yourself?
Yeah, I think that one of the most important things about that, and we all have these phones right now, is we can take the videos and we don't need to share them with anyone. But all we need to do is remind ourselves to look at it once a year. And you may not like your hairdo or whatever, right? It doesn't really matter. But I think that we all respond differently to our own voice. And to see that and not just to tuck it away, I think is just as powerful as when we look at pictures of ourselves and that graduation or whatever that momentous occasion was.
Yeah. Man. Well, hey, how do people reach out to you? How do they connect?
Yeah, I'd say the best way is through LinkedIn. That would be great. I'm doing, just Tim Hillison. I'm doing actually a few polls on the 4S right now. So every Saturday, I'm launching a poll for the next 3 weeks. I've just completed the first one. If you want, go ahead and answer. It would be great. I think that there's a lot of people who've actually answered that right now. Again, a little bit of market research. And then entrypoint1.com is my business. You can visit me on my website, and I would love to meet you and have a conversation.
Sign me up. Put me on that list because I'm in. We got it. Next time you're East Coast or on West Coast, we'll make this thing happen.
I love it. And remember, lobster without the bread, please.
Yep. Lobster, no bread. Who needs to add bread? We don't need the filler. We just want the goodies. So, dude, with that, thank you so much for coming on here, sharing your framework with me. The 4 S's is powerful. We went down rabbit holes on all of them and the idea of storytelling and how we can get strategic about being defensive in the world of AI. This has just been a masterclass. And so I thank you so much.
Thank you, Casey. It was a pleasure being here. Look forward to it.
Hell yeah. For those listening, if you learned something, and I freaking know you did, because I literally have 2 pages of notes over here, front and back. then share this with someone else. 1 person, 2 people, 3 people. 9,000 is cool too. But like, who needs to hear this? Is someone just falling into an avalanche of AI slop? Then shake them gently and then give them this episode so that they can snap out of it, so they can stay up with the changes as we encounter more and more AI and more innovation. So yeah, share this with them. And with that, Tim, thank you again, sir.
Thank you very much, Casey. Have a good one.
All right, everyone. This has been a crazy cool, very exciting episode of the Connect to Market Pod. We will see you all next time. And that wraps up another episode. Thank you for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at connecttomarket.com. Connect to Market is sponsored by Ringmaster, creating podcasts and communities that create relationships, generate revenue, and drive growth.